Hello, everyone. Again, sorry for the radio silence. I threw my back out this week. Um, Tied my shoelaces wrong or something, and then I couldn't walk for like 4 days. So I've got a big backlog of work to get through now that I can hunch over at my bench again for sustained periods of time. And I've got a Pro Reverb that needs a master volume for a studio session on Monday. So I'm gonna maybe do an hour and a half today, maybe an hour and a half, maybe a little bit longer if I forget to look at the time, but it's not gonna be a 3 or 4 hour session this time. It's fun being in your 50s because you don't feel like you're in your 50s. And then, I can still do everything that I could do when I was 25, but then the next day I feel about 85. So, such is life. Let's see. Let's get to some questions and all that stuff. Hey, John, just heard Prince Mongo. You just heard of Prince Mongo and his recent passing. Do you have any pictures of Ashlar Hall, Prince Mongo's castle? Well, Robert Hodges was a trust fund baby asshole. I don't give him any credit for being Prince Mongo. He would run for mayor back in the 80s as a zany, out there candidate. In the late 80s and 90s, he ran a club downtown that specialized in serving drinks to underage girls. He bought Ashlar Hall, which is an old, beautiful sandstone mansion on Central Avenue here, and he filled the floors with sand. He just filled it all with sand, which turned into cat litter. Basically ruined the entire building. On every level, the man was despicable, and I don't want to call Hodges any kind of royalty. So there's my thought about Prince Mongo. Good riddance. Hey, Mr. Mont, is the separation of the two channels on a 68 Custom Deluxe Reverb Reissue a doable project for someone who's never worked on an amp but has pretty good soldering skills and has built DIY pedals? Yeah, all you've got to do is change it to the 65 reissue schematic. That involves removing one blue wire, tying the two plate resistors for V1B and V2B, adding back in the 47 nanofarad cap, which is missing on your board, and replacing one of the 220K resistors, the mix resistors at the input of the phase inverter. So R12, I don't remember the resistor number, but it's the one which is conspicuously missing right before the input to your phase inverter. Just make it the 65 circuit, and you'll have a much better sounding amp anyway. See my videos in the Fender Reissues playlist for ways to desolder the bottom of that board properly. You don't want to go in there with too much heat. You don't want to go in there with too little heat, and you don't want to go in there with any mechanical stress. So work cleanly, work methodically, and don't lift any pads or traces, and you'll be fine. Nervous about the delicate board. Well, that's good. You should be. It's a very doable thing, but you have to know what you're getting into and approach it with that in mind. Hey, Tubaboo, on a 40-watt amp with four 6v6s, is there a benefit to running the power transformer 6.3 center tap through a 100R resistor to the cathode of one of the 6v6s versus running it directly to chassis ground? In terms of where you tie the, there's no point in running the power transformer's center tap through a resistor to the cathode or to the chassis ground. What you do is you either use the physical center tap, or you don't use the physical center tap, and then you use a pair of 100 ohm half-watt resistors to form an artificial center tap. And in a fixed bias amp, that should be referenced to ground, to chassis ground. In a cathode biased amp, you can reference those two resistors, tie those two resistors from either side of the heater to the cathode of one of the output tubes, because the output tube cathode in a cathode biased amp is going to be at some positive voltage DC, 12 to 25 typically, which gives you a little bit of a DC lift. But you should not run your center tap through a resistor to chassis ground, or you just will have a bizarre heater level for a very short period of time before that resistor burns out. Hey, Mr. Bill. Shielding is a very important thing, and the builder of your foot switch was doing the right thing in general, because usually amplifiers that use a foot switch like that are just doing channel switching, and so there's no audio signal being sent out for a dual foot switch with LEDs. It'd be like turning the reverb, switching the channels and turning on a lead boost, something like that. There's no audio being run off. It's just maybe a 5-volt signal that triggers a transistor inside the circuit of the amplifier. But in your case, in Bill's case, he was using it an external dual LED foot switch for reverb and tremolo on a Fender, and the reverb signal being sent out from the amp to the foot switch is actually the same signal which gets amplified by the reverb recovery stage. And so that is live audio being sent out into the world. You put it into a box that's not shielded. All of a sudden you're saying, hey, all the noise in the world, come into the amp right here. So never noticed before, but it seems I can't swap to theater mode until after the stream starts. I have never tried theater mode, so I'm glad it's working for you at some point. Hello, everyone. If I don't single you out, please don't feel slighted. I'm trying to get through as many questions as possible today. App-related questions for once. Hey, Sash, when it comes to power tube bias range, do I find certain amps circuits perform better with a cooler bias versus a hotter one? I find myself aiming between 50% and 60% in most amps of mine. If you have an amp where an awful lot of the drive characteristics are being derived from the output section, putting aside any cathode biased amps like an AC30 or a 5E3 Deluxe, where that's kind of taken care of already. But if you have a fixed bias amp, if it's an amp which has a lot of the overdrive characteristics being derived from the phase inverter, usually mostly the phase inverter, but also the output section, say a JTM45, then it can be beneficial to bias that amp a little bit hotter, so the output tubes are going to compress a bit more and grind a bit more and contribute more to the coloration. So if you have JTM45, you may want to be at 65, 70% idle dissipation. If you've got a Fender Twin where the output section stays clean no matter what, a lot of the Fenders from the 60s, if you bias them at the factory suggested voltages in the schematic with the wall voltage matching, so 110 to 114 volts typically to get the factory schematic voltages at all the various points on the schematic shown, you'll find that amp was biased from the factory about 45%. I typically bias a Fender about 53% idle dissipation. If you're doing like a SLO or a 5150 or a dual rectifier where the preamp has got enormous amounts of gain, there's no need to push the output section too hard. I'm not saying you need to be biasing them at 15% the way you find in most Mesas, or even in the 30s like the way you find in most 5150s, but maybe 35 to 50%. You're going to have longer output tube life because there are a lot of tubes in those big fire-breathing amps, and the longer the use you get out of a quad of 6L6s or 34s, the better from your perspective. And if they're being run cooler, the amp is going to, there are fewer things that can electromechanically or thermally go wrong in the output section. Now, the caveat to that, but it's a good caveat, is that as the bias decreases, the B plus will be higher. So I've had the same amp, say I've got a fire-breathing 100-watt amp. If I bias it 65% idle dissipation, the B plus may be 420. If I bias it at 40%, the B plus may be at like 460. Well, that's enough of a difference in the B plus to give you more headroom through other parts of the stages, and that headroom correlates into more attack when you dig in, and especially for players who do really fast percussive kind of stuff, you can get the amp to speak a different way with a cooler output section even with a hotter preamp section. So while I don't think you need to be as arctically cold as a Mesa, which is just ridiculously cold, the output tubes are barely working at all. That's how they can guarantee that it'll probably work on a Saturday morning at Guitar Center. They don't care what it actually sounds like, obviously, if you've heard the damn things. But, it's fine to go as cool as 35%. It won't hurt anything, but usually 40 to 70% is like the range you want to be in. And anywhere that sounds good to you, as long as the B plus does not go so high as to exceed the ratings of the filter caps in the amp, if it sounds good, it is good. Oh, you're talking to Victor. How's my part of Earth? My part of Earth is hot as balls. It has just been miserably hot here. And it's been a bad week to have back pain. My wife was like, "Do you like a heating pad?" I'm like, "No, I'm hot enough, thanks. I don't need to make my misery more specific." You put the 1 in 4007s after the secondaries. Let's see, that's in reply to, did I miss your previous? Or you're the one asking about the heater? Let's see. I'm not sure what this is in response to, Rocket Bass, but yeah, usually on an amp with a tube rectifier, I will put 1 in 4007s between the secondaries and pins 4 and 6 of the rectifier, if that's what you're saying. Okay, here we go. What difference is there to solid state rectifying here? What's the tube doing if the pair of diodes are present already? Well, the diodes are rectifying and the tube is rectifying. Most of the rectification is still happening by the tube. The diodes aren't doing an awful lot. You're getting about a 1 volt drop, maybe 1.4 volts nominally, but that doesn't turn into a 1 volt drop on the other side. You're also asking any current experienced in that circuit to be shared between the diode and the rectifier tube. And if something were to go wrong in the rectifier tube, those diodes will protect the power transformer from a short within the tube. All these things work well in that you don't really hear the diodes being present. You still get all the benefits of solid state of tube rectification. You still get the voltage drop, you still get the sag, but the tube has a nicer time of it because it's not doing all the heavy lifting itself, and it has some help with handling the current being asked of it. And if that tube fails, because tubes do fail, the power transformer has some protection through those diodes. So there's no downside unless it's like a 1964 deluxe reverb and every solder joint, which is non-original, affects the resale value because people are crazy. Hey, Bill. Thank you very much on both counts. It's good to be back. Got a Marley ABC Pro buffered switching box. I'd like to try using both channels of my 77 Vibrolux at the same time. Is this a good path to a usable tone out of the Vibrolux? Well, I should think that you would have a more than usable tone out of the Vibrolux regardless. That's, Vibrolux is a good sounding amp. But as long as the Morley has polarity control, so you can flip the phase so that the two channels can be in phase or out of phase with each other, depending on what sound you want. Yeah, should be fine. You may depending on the position of the stars, you may benefit from if the Morley has a ground lift on one of the outputs as well. Sometimes you will get a ground loop if you run an ABY pedal or AV pedal in your case to both inputs of one amp. Usually you only get a ground loop if you run the AV pedal to inputs of two different amps, but sometimes you'll get one with one amp, in which case the ground lift is nice, but you should be fine. I don't think but I would say taking a larger view, if you're not happy with the sound of your Vibrolux using either channel by itself, you may not be thrilled with using both channels by themselves. The sound of a 77 Vibrolux should be fantastic. And if it's not, adding gain to it or giving it some different tonal variations will just be putting a slight sheen on the turd. Make sure the core amp sounds good first. But yeah, the Morley should be fine. Unless the Morley adds noise by nature of its buffer. Not all buffers are created equal, and Morley's a pretty ancient technology these days. Okay, tuba boo. That does change things. The schematic shows it running through 110 ohms to 6v6 cathode. Well, in general, on a real 5E3, you would never run the physical center tap through a resistor to the cathode. In this case, it is cathode biased. You would disconnect the physical center tap and just put 100 ohm resistors on either side from on your, say, one of your two 6v6 sockets. You would do pin 7 to pin 8 and pin 2 to pin 8, and then you'd be done. I don't know what transformer they're using in that kit. Weber kits are, sad to say this now that you have it, absolute garbage, and I have no idea what the specs of their transformer are, but it is not good practice to run your heater through one resistor like that. There would be no benefit to reference the physical center tap through a 110 ohm resistor to elevated DC voltage. You would just connect it straight to the voltage if you wanted to reference the heaters, unless they're using a transformer which does not actually produce 6.3 volts roughly in that amp, and they're using that resistor to drop the voltage, in which case I wouldn't trust it, because you're going to be generating a lot of heat through that resistor. All bets are off when it comes to Weber kits. They're junk. I'm sorry to say that, but everything about Weber kits is terrible. Weber speakers, fantastic. Their amp kits should be avoided at all cost. Is there any benefit to using an attenuator on a Friedman Runt 50, or are the clean volume and master volumes good enough? It's one of the more recent combos with 125 watt Celestion Redback. Hey, Edward. Yeah, there's always a benefit to using both. It's not necessary, but let me explain to you just in terms of theory. All right, this is going to be a master volume pot. All right, if you turn, let me get a Sharpie. Just a second. All right, so here's your master volume pot, and it's turned all the way to 10. And you turn it down, everything sounds cool, but with the master volume, you begin to hear that below about here, from here and down, the sound changes an awful lot. Well, the same thing happens with most attenuators. It sounds fine. It sounds fine here. And as you turn it down, it sounds fine. But from here below, it begins to sound kind of weird. It's physics. Let's just call it physics. So the advantage of using an attenuator and a master volume is that you can have the master volume and say, I'm going to use the master volume for that much attenuation. I'm still in the part of the range where the amp sounds great with the master volume. And then I'm going to take that, it's hard to do this backwards, then take the attenuator and do that much because it sounds good in that range. And so using a little bit of attenuation here and a little bit of attenuation there, you end up with a sound equivalent to having the master volume here, but without any of the signal change, without any of the coloration or sacrifices. Every form of attenuation, whether it's a master volume, an attenuated load, involves compromises. The goal is never to make a 100-watt amp sound like a 20-watt amp. The goal is to make a 100-watt amp be able to be used on stage without you losing your gig, or to be heard without being evicted. Now, heard without being evicted means you're probably going to have some serious tonal sacrifices. But used on stage without getting fired, you may be at the equivalent range of a 40-watt amp, and it sounds okay, but you just get a little bit sweeter if you use attenuation and a master, because that way you're not getting coloration from either one, or at least noticeable, objectionable coloration from either one. Hey, middle pickup. They will be doing fine once I get to them. Remember, you said there was no rush, and then my back went out, so I'll be getting to them this week, and at which point they will be doing great. I'm looking forward to them. Should you consider one of the brown box Variacs for the dual Showman reverb? Well, let me get into the amp and see what it needs from the wall, what it's happy with from the wall. And if so, then I'll tell you whether you should get that, or there are Variacs which cost less, though they're larger, and then there's some other options. But let me see what that Showman reverb really wants from the wall. It may be fine at 120. It may prefer to be 117. Maybe prefer to be 114. So I will talk to you once I get into that. Thank you, Uncle Daddy 65. Very kind of you. Coffee is definitely something in need of funding these days. Speaking of which, I don't see him here yet, but Catalan, if I don't see him... Oh, there he is, Cat's Music Journey. Hey, yeah, it is a film can. Hey, Catalan, yeah, that's... I've been shooting a lot of film recently, but Catalan was kind enough to send me some film. I've not gotten to the film yet, some Vulven NC 500 and 400. It's in the fridge, but he also was kind enough to send me some Danish coffee, which is delicious. Been enjoying it. I think we finished it this morning, and sent me some Danish coffee candy, which I must admit was not to my taste. But if you like fruit, hard fruit candies, they were good, high quality, and they're pretty. They kind of look like the stuff my grandmother used to keep out in a bowl that was never for me. I'm not sure who that candy was ever for. It didn't change in 40 years. I think everyone had a grandmother on some side of the family who had that kind of thing. But I do appreciate the care package, Catalan, and I look forward to using that film. It's been too hot to go out during the day, the past month, basically. So I will get to it. I do intend to. My great aunt had a bowl with petrified ribbon candy. Yeah, one of my grandmothers had the ribbon candy. My other one had the lemon drops, and they were all just fused together into like modern art. Not for me. I know it's overpriced, but it's the Marshall's 1974 X-Well built, small hand-wired combo built in England. It's okay. It's very, very good for current production Marshalls. The old ones are much, much better. There are probably better versions of the 1974 18-watt available. I would look to see what Germino's got, for instance. But of the reissue Marshalls, it is one of the better ones. And Scotty says, I think I missed his tag. I will look for your tag. I don't see it. I might not have gotten to it yet. Sorry. I'm putting this up here again. Edward, I'm not singling you out. Please don't feel bad. And welcome to the stream. Please, anyone only ask any one question the one time, because I will answer it as I come to it. So he asked the question. I hadn't gotten to it yet. He asked it again. I hadn't gotten that far, but I did answer it. I answer everyone that I see in the order they come in. So please only ask any one question once, but you can ask as many questions as you want as I can get to. And I'm not trying to make you feel bad, Edward. Thank you very much. Hey, Scotty. Yeah, you got phase switches and ground lifts. All right, have fun with it. If you love the Vibrolux, yeah, you can get more sounds out of it. I was making sure that you weren't trying to I don't like this amp maybe if I try both channels. People do all kinds of stuff in the privacy of their own garages. So, I personally don't find much benefit to jumpering a Vibrolux. But, your mileage may vary. Hey, Scotty, it's cool. That thing on Brad's stream. Um, it's if we were face to face in a bar and giving each other shit, we would know that it's all in good humor. Um, but when it's all typed, it gets weird. I did think it was kind of a low blow, and I'm gonna give you arthritis and chop off part of your finger, see how well you play, fucker. But you know, I can take you. I mean, call me fat. I could do something about that, but but you ugly, and I could lose weight. Um, Madam, if you were my wife, I'd drink it. Where were we? Oh man, dealing with estates and getting ready to move. See, I wouldn't have, even as mad as at you as I was in that fleeting moment, I wouldn't have wished that on you. That's no fun at all, Scotty. And I wasn't really mad at you. I was just like, really? That's not how the game works, man. You're not supposed to actually injure each other, you knuckle dragger. Hey, Jerry Pugh on my favorite Mesa, the Maverick Dual Rec. Got a loud squeal and then half volume on the clean channel. My rec tube or something else, I think is almost guaranteed to be one of your preamp tubes. Especially if it's only on the clean channel. If you're lucky, it's just a tube, and that'd be my bet. It could be something wrong with the channel switching, and I don't remember if that model uses the Vactrols or the relays. But odds are you just got a bum tube somewhere in the preamp. Well, there are only 5 or 6 12x7s. You'll find it. Is there a new generation of Fender amps, Supersonics, Red Knobs, Evil Twins, Hot Rods, Blues, etc.? They could have been great amps had they been designed, built to better standards. Well, yeah, the Blues Junior and the Hot Rod could have been really good amps for about $20 more per amp, and they would have sold just as many or more because the word would have got out that they're really great. Ignore the failings of the dirty channel on the Hot Rod series. Just getting the low voltage supply right. The low voltage supply in the Hot Rod, which is the main problem with it, is inherited from the Evil Twin, and same thing used in the Supersonic. And all those amps, except for the Blues Junior, the low voltage supply fails and overheats because they did a stupid brute force method of getting plus minus 15 volts. And there's so many modern ways to do it. They don't involve heat. They don't involve 6 capacitors and huge 5-watt diodes. And they cost a lot less, take up less space on the board, and don't cost a lot of money. But Fender has never redesigned those amps. They'll call the 4, the 6, the 7, and all pure cosmetic changes, usually to cover up the fact that they're going to a cheaper powder coat versus chrome or something, or they're moving to a cheaper factory. But they're not hiring new designers. There's no design involved in those amps. I happen to know the guy who designed, co-designed the Hot Rod series. Is because PV was killing Fender in the market with the Classic 50 series, the Classic 50, Classic 20, Classic 30. Fender wanted something out on the market in like 6 months. It had to cost them like $300 to make. Or sell for $300 or something. And so what they did was they took parts of what they already had. So they took the power supply from the Evil Twin, and they used it in the Supersonic, they used it in the Hot Rod, they used it in the DeVille, the Blue series, and then all of them have the cheapest filter caps in the world to catch on fire. So, if the 65 reissue series is the best thing Fender's made since like 1981. And you just change out the filter caps, move the screen grid resistors off the board, move the heater supply off the board, and you've got an amp that's really, really good. And so those are the things that they should fix, and those are the things they still don't fix, because that would involve actually admitting that they ever made a mistake, I guess. I don't know. But they're selling enough of them without spending any time hiring a designer. So he had a small stash, man. Hey, Chris R. Good to be seen. The whole flyback diode rectifier thing, can I explain it? I know it's less risk, but how to do it for the AC30 copper panel head and a kit tube town AC18? Well, it's really easy. Let me see if I can call up a schematic showing how it's done. I know that I can. Just one second. Because it's kind of difficult for me to describe this. But if I have a picture... Oh, come on, rotate, man. Just a second, I'm having to download something, I think. No, that one doesn't even have it. Just a second, sorry. I know this is exciting to watch. It's a good question, but it's hard for me to describe without a visual reference for everyone to look at the same time. Let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to remember which ones have it. If this one has it, this is good because this is, yeah, okay, good. Here we go. Just one second, let me make this bigger. Ironically, I'll be using a Blues Deluxe for this example. Let me hide your comment, Chris. All right, so you see here, D5 is an R3000 and D4 is an R3000. That's a 3 kilovolt handling diode, Zener diode. And the anode is facing the plate of each 6L6, and the cathode is going to ground. Or do I have that backwards? I always forget which one the band is. Anyway, the stripe is facing the plate, and the other side goes to ground. Under normal operation, no voltage goes through those diodes to ground. If you have a short or some situation where there's a big spike, all the excess voltage goes through those diodes to ground. Now you can use a couple, like 3 1 in 4007s in series, or you can use R3000s. There are R5000s as well. The point being that if you have a tube that goes south, or you have some kind of short, instead of burning everything up and possibly damaging a transformer, or burning a tube socket, or burning out a screen grid resistor, you'll probably lose the tube, but there won't be any charring inside. There won't be any flames, because all the excess voltage then just goes to chassis, and you blow a mains fuse and you say, what happened? Well, what happened was that $2 worth of diodes saved your amp. Brad is much better explaining this kind of thing than I am. And if I got anode cathode wrong on that, I apologize. I've been thinking about other things, and that's the kind of thing I'm always like, if I were doing a video on that subject, I would look it up again before and make sure I had the right terminology. Because I don't think of the anode cathode. I think of the stripe, the band. Which way does the band go? You know, it's like in a rectifier, the band goes towards the AC. In a bias, the band goes towards the AC. In a rectifier, the band goes towards the DC. It's the direction the current can flow. Anyway, it's an easy way to protect your transformers and protect things from excessive heat. If something really dramatically goes wrong, you're going to lose a tube, but it won't burn up the socket, etc. There's no Canadian power trio. What do you mean, man? There is a Canadian power trio, and they just happen to have a keyboardist too. Everything made it fine as far as I can tell, and I very much enjoyed the coffee. I was going to say I am very much enjoying the coffee, but I enjoyed it so much there is no more to enjoy. And I saw your hello, but I didn't see a tag. I'm sorry. Yeah, I have two chats open, Scotty. Let's see if I can show you guys. Let's see. Entire screen. Does that work? All right. What you can't see is up over here. Well, just to the right of the chat window that you see, I've got the chat window for Ecamm. The one for Ecamm shows me the stuff that I'm replying to in the order that I'm replying it to. And the main one down there that you could see is the one in real time. So I've learned it's good to have both, so I can usually see if someone comes in that I need to say hello to, or if someone says, hey, there's no sound. It's good to have, if this audio cuts out or whatever, it's good to have that warning in real time. Otherwise, I find it 15 minutes later on the one that I'm replying to. Would I do anything to a brand new Hot Rod 4? Asking for a friend. I would sell it, honestly, and buy an amp. But if I was stuck with it, I would replace all the filter caps. I would replace all the low voltage supply stuff, as I've shown in like 300 videos on the damn things. I would make sure that all the solder joints on the jacks and the pots were good. And I would never use the dirty channel. And I would also replace the screen grid resistors. And if it's a brand new one, probably not, but on any of the old ones, I would have replaced all the 100K and 220K plates and mixers, because those resistors like to die. Thanks, Chris. I'll get it for some coffee. Would you like some coffee, Chris? I want a little bit Boston on that one. Does a pot in the feedback loop of a 5F1 give you much variation in tone? No, not a lot. You'll find that the difference between feedback and no feedback is not as dramatic as people think, especially in a 5F1. In a 5E3, you'll get more of a difference because the output can be different. Level can be much more different, and there's more gain. One of the things you can do, which is a very nice thing to do, is to say, instead of just doing feedback or no feedback, feedback with a bypass cathode versus no feedback with a bypass cathode versus no feedback with an unbypassed cathode versus feedback with an unbypassed cathode. That gives you 4 levels of gain. But a pot, you don't hear a lot of in-between stuff. So let's use our film canister volume pot again. Say that was on 10. That's the most, I guess that'd be you probably wire that to be the loudest. So the least feedback, and then turn it down for more feedback, which will lower the volume. You'll hear a difference between here and here. Oops, here. Here's what I meant. And you'll hear a difference between here and here. But the difference between here and here, or here and here, is so subtle that it's not worth making on a pot. That's why people will traditionally switch. They'll just say, hey, I like that, I like that, and I like that. So just a switch. And otherwise, you're going to spend your entire time wondering, well, should I turn it down a little bit or up a little bit? And you won't really know if you're hearing a difference at all. It's better just to say 2 position switch, 3 very distinct levels. That was clearly the one I want. Move on. Think about other things. Thank you, plant pot people. Plant pot people. Plant pot people. Thank you very much. I want Freeman to build his VX30 in a 1974 1x12 cab with the Celestia Gold. Perfect size. Well, tell him. He's on here sometimes. And he reads his emails. He even replies to most of them. I think it'd be very difficult to build a VX30 in a 1x12. It'd be about impossible to do it with a Celestia Gold. It would probably nuke that Celestia Gold pretty darn quick. Plus, the Celestia Gold would be the wrong sound for that amp, in my opinion. But that's why opinions are like everywhere, man. Best tubes for AC15 source. Depends on what you want to, which part of the tube, which part of the amp, which AC15. In general, JJs are fine. Hey, Hamilton, I'm sorry, I will look for that. I have been couch-bound much of this week, and I'll check and see if it went into spam or something. Any color that you've got handy that's not pink. So, if you know, brown, black, gray, anything that's easy, I really appreciate it. But I'll find your email. Hopefully there'll be a phone number there I can reach out to you. Sorry, just... It's been a rough week. What do you mean there's no Rush? Rush exists. Rush is out there somewhere, being awesome. But today there's REM, which is also awesome, though they're not out there doing it anymore. What are my preferred brand for resistors? For my deluxe reverb build, I've gone with a Verity, but mostly Vishay, Dale, RN for metal film, and Omite and Coaspire for carbon film. Hey, Ethos. Well, you spent a little bit more money than maybe you should, but those are all fine choices. I use, for a deluxe reverb build, I wouldn't use those. I would use Yageo half-watt 5% carbon films for everything in the audio path. I would use Vishay, not Vishay Dale, just Vishay Pro O2 for all the resistors in the power circuit, and I would use Vishay PC or AC series 3 watt, 470 ohms for the screen grid resistors. And I would use the Pro O2s in the bias circuit as well. But the Coaspires are fantastic. They just are built exactly like and sound exactly like the Yageos, but the Coaspires cost more. And the Vishay Dale RNs, I think, are fantastic if you're building an SLO or something similarly very, very high gain. You won't notice any difference for the marginal decrease in noise that an RN series gives you over carbon film in a deluxe reverb. But you didn't choose poorly. If anything, you chose a little too richly. But the amp should sound fine. What are my thoughts on Tube Depot's used US-made tubes? They've perked your interest. Are they any good, or should I stick with new tubes for your deluxe reverb build? They're great. They have one of the best tube testing setups out there these days. They've got maxi matchers and a testing routine designed by my friend Rob Hull, who's a phenomenal tech. He works for FedEx now, fixing the airplanes. But he was in the Navy, then did a stint as an amp tech. Now he works fixing airplanes. But he used to work at Tube Depot, and he designed their tube testing. And they actually test it at real plate voltages, not like 200 volts, like 400 volts and stuff. I don't know that there's any benefit to buying an old expensive RCA preamp tube versus a new, relatively inexpensive one. But if you want an old RCA one, they would be one of the safest places to buy them from, and they have a really good 30-day warranty, and they do great communication. So yeah, if you want new old stock, I would say that's probably the safest place to get them. Tell Michelle I sent you. You won't get a discount, but tell her anyway. I don't get any kickback either. Not a question, more of a whine. Why is it so hard to find a 2-lug, soft, momentary Carling style foot switch that is normally closed? Makes the build cost on external foot switches for Boss much, much more. Grr. Because it's much more common for a momentary switch to be normally open. Much easier to build it that way. Devil's Advocate says you should find a 2-lug soft momentary switch with PC connections that will suit your needs, and make a little bitty PC board that attaches to it, and then a little transistor, like a, I don't remember if you want a PNP or an NPN for that. Just a little transistor gate, like 3 resistors, maybe a small cap, and then a little transistor, just make a flip-flop circuit, and just have that together with 2 wires for the 2 sides of the what's switched, and then something to connect to the power of the existing pedal. Anything 5 to 9 volts should trigger the same basic transistor circuit. You're basically just saying, if X then Y, there you go. And that way you could use a cheap pre-existing switch, 30 cents worth of components, and then you would have your custom solution. Triumph and Anvil. Yeah, but Rush had songs. K. Willis, given most EQs are passive, cut only, and given pots have varying tapers, why don't we consider wide open a good starting neutral and attenuate frequencies to taste? Because when the amps are designed, we design them to sound most appropriate or most like the intended purpose at noon, so that you can then add more or take away whatever frequencies you want to sculpt. If you design it to sound a certain way with all the knobs at 10, some people will love that. Others will say, I don't care for that. I wish I could turn the bass up more, or I wish I could turn the treble up more. But then you have the Spinal Tap problem. It can't go any louder. You're already at 11. So that's why. Plus, you would have to redesign the entire thing because you'd have less insertion loss, which would also mean that as you turn the knobs down and decrease frequencies, the level would drop dramatically. There are good reasons why we do this. So passive EQ is not a bad thing, and whether it's a Marshall or a Fender or a Vox, and almost everything else out there has been designed as a copy of one of those 3 tone circuits. It was designed to work the way it works, and if you want more treble, you can turn it up. And if you turn up the treble a lot on, say, an early version of the Fender tone stack, like a 62 Blonde Bassman, and you turn that treble up, you will hear what happens when you no longer have the insertion loss, because you're going to get a massive overdriven tone with a 61, 62 Bassman that you won't get from a 58, that you won't get from a 63. So, Fender was playing around with this quite a bit. There are reasons. Basically, almost any current production amp, you should be able to set the knobs at noon, and if it doesn't work for you by a lot, it's not the right amp for you. It should be like, that sounds pretty good. Let me turn this knob a tiny little bit. There it is. And you don't think about it anymore, and you go play. You're very, very, very welcome. Rolf's got a Marshall 4101, 100-watt JCM 800, and a 50 microfarad leg of 1 cap is not used, and is factory stock. Tech on YouTube said this is a factory mistake and connected in parallel with the other 50 leg. Is this correct? The schematic shows unconnected as 6L6s. I'm pretty sure that you are describing. Are you describing the little capacitor between plate and screen on the output tube, which would typically be a 5881, but a 6L6 is 5881? Let me call up that schematic. In which case, I would. Let me look. I'm gonna call up that schematic, and hopefully we can find which capacitor that is and answer this together. A second. There is a capacitor in the JCM 2000s that I always disconnect or omit because it was not rated for the voltage present and always burned up for no good reason. But I'm not remembering one in a 900 series. So let me see if I can figure out. And a 50 microfarad 4101. Let's see. Is that the same thing as the 4100? Marshall numbers are so awful. I assume that's the same as the 4101. 4100 here. Let's see. Oh man, that's one of those. Okay, here's the real schematic. Do you happen to have your schematic handy? I'm looking at the 4100 schematic. Are you on here? Well, I don't want to go down this. I don't want to go down this road too much if Rolf's no longer here. If you're still here, let me know exactly which model and tell me if you have the schematic and can tell me which cap you're talking about, and I can look at it. But otherwise, I'd be a blind man describing an elephant. Middle pickup loves the sound of a good hot rod DeVille. Can I explain the difference between the dual Showman and that amp? Are the pre super different? No, the hot rod DeVille is very similar in a lot of ways to a standard Fender. Has a volume before the tone stack instead of after. The tone stack's driven by a different stage. It is a different circuit, but the core idea of the circuit is very similar. It's just a slightly different way to skin a cat. It's kind of in between your Showman and say a 5F6A as far as the entire structure goes, in terms of how the circuit works. But in that, like the 5F6A, it's got a preamp tube, then a volume, then a preamp tube, but 5F6A, the next stage has another tube where the cathode drives the tone stack. The dual Showman, the second stage is plate, drives the tone stack. So it's a little bit tweedy, but mostly it sounds like a blackface, and there's nothing wrong with it. All right, Rolf is back. It's the 4101 and the top right schematic 5050 500 volt bottom cap on schematic. Okay, so you've got a dual 50 filter cap, and one of your 50s is not connected. All right, so that helps. Let me see if I can find the Marshall 4401 schematic. And I'm pretty sure I already know the answer, but I want to be, sorry, 4101. But I want to be sure before I put this out there. All right. So, next question. Come on, man. I hate when you click on schematic and they're like, well, if you'd really like to see this, give us some money. I'm like, I'll get it for free everywhere else. 4101, it's dual reverb. Okay. Here we go. Marshall 1989. Just a second, guys. There's a couple different versions of this. I'm seeing if that changed. There's one from 89. There's one from 90. There's one from 92. One from 94. And I'm just seeing if they made a change. I know this is the most exciting kind of stream to watch. All right, every version of the schematic that I'm seeing seems to show both sections of the dual 50. You're saying top right of the schematic, 50, 50, 500 volt. See, I'm not seeing it at top right of the schematic. Do you know what's the date on your schematic that you're looking at? Rolf, which version of the schematic you're looking at? Because I'm not seeing any version of the schematic which shows the filter cap at the top right. It must be this one here that you're talking about. And I think it's just a typo. 1994. Okay. Yeah, all right. Yeah, all right. That's 2002, 1994. All right, 1994 schematic. I think it's just a bad print of the schematic. I'll show you what I'm talking. I'll show everyone what I'm talking about here. Show. This one. All right, right up here. That's a bad drawing, but they should have both sections of the dual 50 tied together. That's your reservoir cap. And if you look at the previous versions of that amp, you will see that they are indeed tied together to give you 100 microfarad, not 50 microfarad. This 94 version of the schematic is absolutely the worst drawing possible. Let me call up the previous one. Let's do the 1992 schematic. You can see the same thing in this area. So the first one is 250s in parallel, gives you 100 microfarad right there. That's what yours should be on a 100 watt amp. And then here they have a dual, but the top sections are not tied together, and the same thing would be in other parts of the amp. Yeah, so they should definitely be tied together in yours. The 94 version was drawn very poorly and probably Xeroxed poorly by Marshall at some point. Welcome to our world where you got to figure out what they say and what they meant to say. So it should be tied together. Now it'll work obviously without them being tied together, but you're not going to have the right amount of filtering for a 100 watt Marshall. All right, so Mike's, thank you for the tube for the AC15 and CC2 Custom Classic. You can use I wouldn't spend too much on a Custom Classic. because the circuit's got some, especially on the 15's, got some real weaknesses. Just get a set of JJs if you need new tubes for it. There's no need to spend more. Let's see. Hey, progress. Found myself doing a while this past week, fixing a Wren and Cuff triangle muff pedal. The ribbon cable going from the triple pole double throw daughter board to the main board broke, and so the bypass signal was lost. Where's the punchline? It's like looking at a mansion with a broken Winnebago screen door as the front door. Yeah, it's so much fun. Yeah, the AC30 is a 40 watt amp, and the Gold is a 50 watt speaker. That 40 watts is measured clean. Uh, in theory, a pair of Celestion Blues gives you 30 watts. In theory, AC30 is 30 watts clean. In reality, the AC30 pushes about 40 watts. And in reality, a pair of healthy Blues can handle about 50 watts. But that's all that dissipation and movement being shared by two speakers. You ask one speaker to do the same thing, and I think 50 watts is just on the edge of not being able to handle it. And it's a $300 gamble versus any number of 65, 75 watt speakers out there that cost less, sound better than a Gold, and can handle it. I'm not a big fan of the Celestion Gold, as you might tell. Hey, Chris R. got a custom classic AC15, did the cut mod, sounds great. Very necessary to do that cut mod on those things. Took out blue and put in greenback, selling on again, keeping the blue. Build quality was nice, agree or nay? Yeah, the build quality was better. This will make the hot take here. The build quality on this CC15 was better than the TBX15, because that thing was junk. But the build quality of the Custom Classic 15 was nowhere near as good as the build quality of the Custom Classic 30. And the circuit in the Custom Classic 15 and the TBX 15 are not the same circuit, aside from the power tubes and all, as the AC30 versions. They're plate-driven tone stacks. So the various things are very, very different compared to the actual circuit. Where the TBX, aside from the ground loops and the stupid things that the Korg factory did, was the most authentic replica of the 64, the 59 through 68 circuit that JMI made. And the 15, the 15 was not that at all. The Custom Classic was like not what a Vox AC30 ever sounded like, but what people thought it sounded like. It was really bright in stock form. And the AC15 was an even brighter version of that. And the current Custom series is a modern take on getting close to the old JMI sound. It comes really, really close. And the 15 and the 30 are the same circuit, aside from the power transformers and output transformers and the tube complement, pretty much. I'm not a fan of the AC15 Custom Classic, but neither do I think it's a bad amp. I just think for the money, they're better amps these days. Hamilton just put a deposit down on a Germino Lead 35. If I want to play it through a 2x12, thoughts on mixing a greenback and a G1265? Will the impedance work, since the G1265 is either 8 or 15, I think. Well, you can get two 16, or 15, talking Celestions, 15 ohm speakers, and then you've got an 8 ohm load. If you do it in series, do it in parallel, but you should. So you can get a 15 ohm greenback and 15 ohm G1265. The impedance will work just fine. Now, I would worry a little bit about a 20 watt speaker in parallel with a 65 watt speaker. I think you might. No, wait. Sorry. In series, I'd be worried. In parallel, you'd be fine. Yeah, absolutely fine. Sorry. I'm trying to be accurate live while thinking about a whole bunch of things and not want to give anyone bad advice. So the trouble with thinking out loud is sometimes you get it wrong the first time you say it. If you're doing parallel wiring, you'll be fine mismatching the wattages. In a series wiring, you would be asking for trouble. If I build a high watt DR103 copy into a top mounted chassis with a tube stick downward, I would have to flip the lug orientation of the pots 180 degrees, right? Look at a Baseman versus a Marshall 100 watt head or 50 watt head. It's the same thing. You don't have to flip the pot. You don't have to flip the pots at all. As far as, well, there are two considerations. Flipping the print and the knobs, it's up to you. Whether you want it to be something where you see everything from the player's perspective in front of the amp, or everything from the player's perspective behind the amp. Like old Fender Tweeds, the perspective was assumed from behind the amp. More modern amps, perspectives in front of the amp. I'm looking at Uncle Larry here. Perspective is still from behind the amp. As far as the pot orientation, you always want the pots to be oriented the same way. You would have them oriented towards the outside of the chassis. So when it's time to clean and lubricate them, all the openings in the pots are visible, reachable by the tech, because you don't want them to be facing down. You just want to be able to clean them out. Should I stick with two greenbacks? It's up to you, man. I would contact Greg Germino and see if his customers have certain combinations that they absolutely love. I'm not a huge fan of a greenback in any open back cab, except for the AC15 Custom. For some reason, the dimensions of that cab really work well with the greenback. But, you know, a greenback in a G12H30, the Heritage 30 have always been a great combination. I imagine a G1265 would work really well with it too. Oh, fuck, Carno. Are they listed end of line? Well, then I'm gonna have to be buying a whole lot of them. I'll check Mauser and see what's going on. I hate when I love something and it goes away, and so many of the things, 2 years ago, I could still buy brand new, really high quality carbon comp resistors, and all of a sudden they stopped. I'm so old, I remember when I could buy Zycon filter cap, electrolytic caps, Zycon caps in general, and Zycon resistors were everywhere. They're just all gone. It's shocking how fast all the through-hole stuff is being discontinued. I saw a picture of your pedal board, Hal, but I didn't see a question about it. I mean, Hal, you had me build you that massive custom thing, and then you keep changing your mind, and I don't want to do any more pedal boards. If I have to charge for my time for these things, and if you change your mind all the time, I feel like I'm making you waste your money. But if you have a question about your pedal boards, send me the question, and I'll try to answer it. But I think I was lying on the couch trying to ignore how bad my back hurt, and I got a text showing a picture of a pedal board, and I probably went to sleep. Sorry, I'm just being honest with you. How's my bud? He knows I'm being honest. I'm not being mean. I may be being ornery, but that's different than mean. Hey Dale, what do I recommend for a 12 to 8-inch speaker adapter ring? I might try a 10-inch speaker. I've never played around with adapter rings. I'm the wrong person to ask. I do not know. I would contact one of the whoever. I would contact Tone King and ask them if they have anyone that they recommend. But I've never played around with it, so I don't have anything to tell you. Sorry. The bridge pickup on my modded Strat is very bright, but it's got no tone knob wired to it. What would be more efficient for less treble, connecting to a tone knob or put a cap on the volume? I don't do either of those things. Well, I do. I have my Strats wired, especially my traditional Strats, wired so that the tone circuit is on the neck, and there's a tone circuit Actually, there's a tone circuit on the neck in the middle, and there's a tone circuit on the bridge. And just adding the tone circuit to the bridge takes that really piercing frequency out, and then you can roll it down if you want more than that. But the other thing I do after that is I do a custom wiring, and I've shown it in a video, like what people like 50s wiring for Les Paul. So my tone circuit's always hung off the wiper of my volume pot, never off the input of the volume pot. And that way I don't have to use a treble bleed pot. I don't lose any highs as I roll down on the volume, but I also don't get that artificial high frequency response as you turn down the volume. So do not use treble bleed circuits. I do not. I'm not saying do not use. I do not use treble bleed circuits. I just put the tone circuit on the wiper so the pickup's not loaded down at all times. And I must have tone on the bridge of a Strat for me to be able to stand it. Thank you. It's very nice to be seen again. I'm going to try to wrap this up pretty soon, though. I've got to get a Pro Reverb ready for that studio session on Monday. Used to have a 5E3 that did drive a bit more when the tone was fully open. Well, yeah, there's a certain amount of attenuation in a 5E3 unless the tone's turned up all the way. That's a really complicated circuit to talk about because the two channels are all interactive. But it's not as dramatic as you would get with most Marshalls or even Fenders as far as diming them. You want real fun on the Fenders with a mids pot, turn all three knobs all the way counterclockwise. You'll barely get any sound at all if you get any. Well, a 1x12 is one sound, but a 2x12 is going to be a fuller potential and potentially much louder sound. I prefer a 2x12 with a Germino or any other Marshall style amp. I think it's a more authoritative sound. But a 1x12 is not a bad thing, and a 65 watt speaker would be the right choice in a 1x12 for that. Why does Deluxe Reverb use 6.6K output transformer in the Princeton Reverb 8K when they use the same output valves? Because the Princeton inherited that transformer from the Champ, and they had it. There's a lot less wattage, and the Princeton was always just a step up from the basic student model. There are other reasons. The output tubes in a Princeton, because they're in a paraphase phase inverter, cannot be swung as hard. They don't have as much current going through them, and the output section behaves very differently in a Princeton than a Deluxe, if you look at it the right way. But unless you're designing an amp from the ground up, the answer is pretty much 'cause. Hey, Azimir, my AC15C1 seems like it blew a power tube. I don't see anything burnt other than the HT fuse. What are the odds it was something other than the tube's time to go? I think it's probably one of your EL84s went south, and the amp protected itself by blowing the HT fuse, and so you need a $1 fuse and two $30 EF86s, not EF86s, sorry. So you can tell I've been out of this a while. EL84s, and you should be good to go again. Just purchased a Weber 12A125 20 watt speaker for my 5E3 build. I'm second guessing myself whether I should have gone for 30 watt. My thoughts? You're gonna be right on the edge. I would have gone with the 30, but depending on how loud you play and how long you play, you may be just fine. The original speaker was a 20 watt. The old, Chicago Jensen would have been 20 watts. And it may be just the sound is just so perfect that even if you were to blow it in 5 years, it was worth it and you'll buy another one. You're probably okay. Your V2 tube died. Well, your V2 is probably a Russian tube. V2 in a AC15 custom is a cathode follower position. And as I've mentioned, Russian tubes, that's Sovtek, Electro-Harmonix, Mullard, Gold Lion, all those. They don't like high voltage on their cathodes, so they're bad tubes to use as a cathode follower. Put a JJ or a Chinese tube in V2, probably won't happen again for a long, long time. But coincidence, not coincidence, and there's a discrete reason for it, but unrelated to your output tube. See, I didn't even see the heart emoji until I saw that. But right back at you. Thank you very much. All right, I'm gonna make sure I haven't missed any big burning questions or any last super chats. But I need to wind this down. Sorry. Usually I do 3, sometimes longer, but today I've got to get to some other stuff. Wait, people change their minds often on pedal boards? Yeah, I made Hal the best looking custom wired pedal board, everything perfect. Then he decides it's too big for his needs, even though I said, are you sure this isn't too big? And he's, yeah. Man, guitar players, what can we do? Can I talk about what issues one might run into the Marshall Club and Country? No, there's no endemic issues. They're good amps. They're just combo versions of the head stuff, of the bigger stuff that was also in heads. I mean, that is the sound of moving pictures. That's an amp I'm particularly fond of. I don't like the cosmetics of it, but other than that, it sounds great. And I don't think there are any major issues to watch out for, other than they're about as old as we are, man, and they need to be recapped at this point. Oh, I know how. I'm just giving you shit. Well, the power station's got a lot more features than just being a straight up attenuator. So I think it might be overkill for a lot of jobs. The Weber stuff is junk. Don't buy any of the Weber stuff. But I'm not up on all the attenuators on the market. I can tell you don't buy the Weber, and I can tell you that the Friat power station is a pretty specialized bit of kit that's more than needed in most cases. But I don't know all the things that are on the market this week. Sorry, it's just not something I've played around with. Middle Pickup says it's fantastic, and it is really good. It has some overkill issues for a lot of players. All right, Arno, I'll check the Mauser notifications. They're good about doing the end of life stuff, but well, you must have had a bad JJ, in which case Tube Depot will swap you out. They've got like a 30-day return policy. It happens. It happens a lot more with the Russian tubes, but I tell people tubes are glorified light bulbs. They can last 7 years, 7 minutes, 7 weeks. You never know. Yeah, Mr. Mont, you're removing the wire that's joining the two plates. You're adding the 47 nanofarad cap back in C5, and you have to add the missing mix resistor back. Real fast, let me check the schematic, because I'm a nice guy. I'll tell you the part number. But the input to the phase inverter in the 65 has got two 220K resistors, and they take one of them, the unused one, out from the normal channel on the 68 custom. It was there on the 65, and it is part number Sorry, it's sideways. I got to tilt my head a little bit. R12. I was right. R12. R12 will be missing on yours. Put R12 back in there. You'll be good to go. And Alan is off to Tuscany. Very nice. Well, here, coincidentally, I've been showing you my pictures from Florence, Firenze the whole time. So, man, eat fantastic food and gelato. Yeah. Well, if you have any questions, I did a very scientific survey of Florence to find the best gelato and the best sandwiches. So, Antico. Life is so hard. I'm very jealous. I need to get back. All right, so let me remember to do the things I'm supposed to do at the end of these things, because I've got a business model, don't you know? It's always good to see everyone. It's good to be seen again. I'll try to get some videos out this week. I've got to tie myself to the bench and get through a master volume installation on this Pro Reverb, and I'm able to walk and tie my shoes and pick up things off the ground again. So I think I'm in for a much better week, if only it would stop being a zillion degrees with 100% humidity. All right, be well, everyone. See you next time. Hopefully it'll be next Saturday, and hopefully there'll be some videos before then.